Today's topic, the intellectual dark web. Yeah, this is not a solo one, but I'm going to read a little intro here before I bring in my guest, who just wrote a book about the intellectual dark web. In her New York Times Magazine cover story on May 8th, 2018, Bari Weiss described the intellectual dark web, the IDW, as an alliance of heretics who are making an end run around the mainstream conversation, close quote. These heretics, she noted, are iconoclastic thinkers, academic renegades, and media personalities who were purged from institutions that have become increasingly hostile to unorthodox thought, close quote. In response, their sweep around what Weiss described as legacy media include podcasting, blogs, social media, YouTube channels, and public speaking. Including in this initial cohort were the mathematician Eric Weinstein, who coined the IDW label, podcaster Joe Rogan, neuroscientist Sam Harris, talk show host Dave Rubin, the evolutionary biologist Bret Weinstein and Heather Heyne, the psychologist Jordan Peterson, the conservative commentators and authors Ben Shapiro and Douglas Murray, the anti-extremist activist Majid Nawaz, the feminist activists and authors Ayaan Hirsi Ali and Christina Hoff Sommers, the Quillette magazine publisher Claire Lehman, the neuroscientist and sex researcher Deborah So, and me. As the conversation continued past Weiss's New York Times feature, other dark web intellectuals were added to the assemblage, including Steven Pinker, Heather McDonald, Neil Ferguson, Gad Saad, James Damore, Jonathan Haidt, Greg Lukianoff, and the list goes on and on. I don't want to leave anybody out, but it's a long list. Whoever's included, however, Weiss asked rhetorically, should we be listening? Her answer in the affirmative led to a flurry of articles, essays, and opinion editorials about the IDW and what exactly members of this cohort believe. A number of commentators suggested that there is some irony in describing as oppressed and silenced individuals like Joe Rogan, who reach like 10, 15 million people every day. Jordan Peterson, who has millions of followers. Ben Shapiro has his own media company. Dave Rubin, who has his own media company, and so on. Steven Pinker, one of the best-selling authors in America. Okay, how is it that these people are silenced? Most of these post-Weiss commentaries on the IDW carry a strong negative valence, in which the authors make sweeping generalizations about the cohort based on a select handful of members, further delimiting by selective quoting. From Twitter feed, for example, Jordan Peterson said this about gender, so all of IDW must believe that. No. Okay. So the IDW is anti-left. No, it's far left. No, it's far right. It's mega right. What is it exactly? All right, here to sort it out for us today is Dr. Jamie Q. Roberts, who has just authored a new book. Here it is, The Intellectual Dark Web, A History. You got to love this, and possible future. I have no idea if there's a future, but there's definitely a history. Dr. Jamie Q. Roberts is a lecturer in the Department of Government and International Relations at the University of Sydney. There, he specializes in international relations with a focus on international security and popular culture. But more broadly, he is a first principles philosopher. Okay, we're going to have to deconstruct that and see what that means. Who is interested in the true, the good, and the beautiful. Well, I like the true, the good, and the beautiful, but I don't really know what that means. So maybe he'll tell us a little bit about that. He thinks that the best insights into the human condition are found in literature. I have to agree on that. Shakespeare, Conrad, Larkin, Tolstoy, to name a few. The beautiful that has stood the test of time contains the true and the good, he says. Okay, as you can see, we're going to get into a lot of interesting topics here today. He also writes music, science fiction, and is building a vast, immersive art environment. I don't even know what that is, but he says, seriously. All right. Jamie, nice to see you.
Thanks so much for having me, Michael.
So you are Australian, and you have this interest in international relations. That's your specialty. Give us a little bit of background. What's your story? How did you get into political science and all that stuff? And then how did you stumble into the IDW as a topic for a book?
All right. I started out at uni long ago in maths and psychology. So that in my teenage years, I was very much maths, physics, chemistry, which I think is interesting. So I think I have a very sort of strong sciencey root. But in my I guess late teens or early 20s, I really just caught philosophy, and I've never really managed to shake it off. But in particular, I suppose I always loved literature, but I guess I really fell in love with it in my late teens and early 20s, and had one of those awakening moments where I just thought, what am I doing? I've got to study literature. So I ended up studying literature for a while, and then I first I was writing about gender stuff back in 2002 for my honours dissertation. Honours is like a Australian or British sort of fourth year dissertation that you write, 20,000 words. And that's when I first came across identity politics, cancel culture. I got my first what I call, soft cancellation, where they don't exactly get rid of you, but they make your life hard. And so that was my first run-in with all of this. I would have carried on in literature, but uh, anyway, I had difficulties in the English department, and I just by chance fell into a politics department because I found a PhD supervisor there. It was just complete luck, and my supervisor happened to teach international relations, and one thing led to another, and I ended up teaching international relations. But I've always kept a strong interest in literature, but just professionally, I've kind of ended up just going down that path, and it's a long story, not that exciting, the details of it. But yeah, I eventually ended up with a tenured academic position at Sydney University in politics and international relations. So as I say, yeah, literature's my true love, but I very much enjoy the philosophy, the history of international relations. The basic idea that the international realm is anarchistic, and what that means for power and how it all ties in with human nature. All of that stuff's fascinating to me. So it's fun to teach. Machiavelli, Sun Tzu, Art of War, Artha Shastra, sort of an ancient Indian text. It's a lot of fun looking at different classic works and trying to understand different cultures' perspectives, and then how that helps us to understand the international realm, that sort of thing. So yeah, that's one of the things. But yeah, as I say, I've always kind of done the gender stuff, and then yeah, having come across the whole identity politics thing back in 2002, postmodernism, I've basically been battling that in the background ever since, pretty badly, frankly. But uh, before the whole YouTube thing broke, and we learnt about people like Jordan Peterson and all of that in Australia, yeah, what can I say? I felt like uh, the universities were just completely insane, and no one else could see it, and no one was talking about it. And so I was often trying to explain to people how, like, there is such a thing as truth and evidence, and how all the crazy sort of, well, we call it postmodern, post-structuralism, whatever the hell you want to call it, and how like none of it makes sense really, and it just falls apart at the first hurdle. So, I mean, I was naturally skeptical about all of this, but it's kind of just like shaking people and say, this is crazy. Can't you see it's crazy? And I'm thinking, am I crazy? What's going on? How could the universities be so broken and no one's talking about it? And so that's what I mean. I say I was battling it badly. I just, it was
You
sort of
mean
hard to know what to do.
ineffectively? You mean you didn't feel like you were able to make your
Yeah.
point?
Yeah. Ineffectively. And, yeah, just hard to know what to say, where to go, how to publish, anything like that. It just felt like, it was just, yeah, I mean, looking back now, like some sort of, yeah, just eternal Maoist struggle session, or some just endless engagement with the Stasi. I don't know. It just had that constant sense that if you say the wrong thing, they're going to come for you, and they do from time to time. It's not a fantasy. Like every year or two, something bad happens to a greater or lesser extent if you speak out about this stuff. So yeah, so that was always cooking along in the background, and so I was always pushing back against that. And then, yeah, once I got an academic position in 2020 at Sydney University, and I had to, you have to publish or perish naturally. So I thought, heck, I'm writing a book about the intellectual dark web. I mean, this is one of the most significant intellectual free speech. No, it is. It's the main intellectual free speech movement of our time. And okay, sure, mountains have been said about it, but to me, it seemed to be quite coherent, not coherent. It seemed like there were a number of very consistent talking points, and I just thought, look, this is good. I'm just going to put them all together in a nice, neat book, and publish that as part of my part of my job. And the book
Nice.
did publish last year with Routledge, but it was pulled from sales within 2 weeks. because of complaints, and
Complaints from whom?
never found out. I asked.
Really? Do you think it's somebody in the IDW that just doesn't want to be part of it or doesn't want to be written about? Or, I mean, these are people, I mean, I can't imagine it could be any of the people I just listed because they thrive on people saying bad things about them or anything about
No,
them.
no. I don't know if there were complaints or whether that was just a pretext to pull the book. I really don't know. I mean, or whether there was someone actually complained. I think I managed to sell 13 or 14 copies before before it all happened.
Oh my
But
God.
or yeah, I don't know if it was someone from within the organization. But yeah, the book was investigated and deemed it needed a major rewrite. And so, you reach a certain point, you're like,
Well, you had sent
no.
me that original paperback. I think it was a pre-press galley,
Uh,
but I didn't check to see how different it was. Did you have to do some rewriting?
no.
I mean, and if you
When
don't know what the complaints are, what would how would you know what to rewrite?
Okay, that's a good question. The point in the end, when I, was talking with them was that it didn't sufficiently engage with theory, that old word, theory.
What?
And from the whole start, I said to my editor, I want to write a book that's broadly accessible, so I don't intend to fill it with academic citations, which is kind of the way things go. I mean, like that is a very good reason for including a whole lot of academic citations in different aspects of academia, because you're, you know, focusing on a particular aspect of knowledge and showing your innovation and all of that. It works particularly well in the sciences, but in the social sciences, which are, I wouldn't say entirely lost, but considerably lost, it's just a sort of a homage game where you cite people, you use the jargon of the moment, and ultimately you make your work completely irrelevant and boring to anyone uh, outside academia, and you also, your work will be dated because academic fashions move on quickly, and
There's tons of
uh,
references in here. I'm looking at 14 pages at the end, and then every chapter has 50, 60 references.
it's
And
mostly to podcasts.
yeah, well, there's a lot of that. Yeah, a lot of Rogan in there. But in terms of theory, I mean, you have, the Western civilization, media, religion, trans, intersectionality,
Uh,
responsibility and masculinity. These are all like theoretical debates that are in pop
yeah,
culture now.
look, I don't know, like what. Yeah, I mean, for people who have been in the unis for 10 or 20 years and who are, dissenters, they sort of get it. It's just, I think, like I say in the preface, so much of this is kind of a grooming process, or so much of being an academic. Like, I shouldn't have made it as far as I did. Like, it's a bit of luck, but so much of it's a grooming process. The way, you have to, what they let you publish, what they don't let you publish, the changes you have to make. And then even as an academic, that that you have to go for grants. But if you don't write the right theory, this is the social sciences, maybe the hard sciences are still okay. But if you don't write the right theory and make the right noises, you don't get the grants. The whole thing's just this process for making you sort of docile and one of them. And yeah, it's just you can just feel it everywhere whenever you're in the institution. So But
Well,
anyway, so I
yeah,
didn't change the book, and Pitchstone agreed to publish it, and
well,
it
I'm
pretty
glad they
much rolled
did.
out as is with a new preface, which is like a great outcome. So, all's well that ends well, sort of.
Yeah. Now, let me just give you a few examples from the physical sciences of where it is bad in the physical and biological sciences. Here's the astrophysicist Sabine Hassenfelder from a couple years ago. I wrote a research proposal about inflation in the early universe, not your supermarket, and it bounced back because I didn't explain its relevance to, quote, sex, gender, and diversity, close quote. This is on Twitter. And she says, I need to add a paragraph on this. Anyone have any idea what I should write? Like, what are the magic words you're supposed to plug in
Yeah,
there?
I know, right?
And something like, well, I will hire people of color to work in my lab or something because the Big Bang and inflationary theory has nothing to do with those particular topics. Here was another one, observing whiteness in introductory physics, a case study, and it was all about Whiteboards, the ones that on the wall that you write on, have been shown to have a number of affordances when they are used as a collaborative tool that all members have access to. In this episode, they also play a role in reconstituting whiteness as social organization. In particular, whiteboards display written information for public consumption. I don't even know what any of this is trying to get
Dear
to.
God.
Yeah, I'll just kind of skip to a couple other examples. This is from one of my Skeptic columns. I said, "Where did they get to blackboards? Oh God!" Here's Astro 2032, Astronomy 2034 at Cornell University. Black holes, race, and the cosmos. Okay. So I snarkily, after reading the abstract about this, I snarkily said, perhaps a 2025 update will include a discussion of the Big Bang as a reference to Sean Diddy Combs's parties. I mean, there's stuff on chemistry. A collection of 67 papers published in the Journal of Chemical Education include Decolonizing the Undergraduate Chemistry Curriculum, Chemistry and Racism, Integrating Anti-Racism, Social Justice, and Equity Themes in Biochemistry. I mean, there's like 24 more examples, and I'm just the tip of the iceberg here on this. I mean, it's everywhere.
Look, I hear you. To be honest, I'm trying to just be a touch upbeat so that I don't sound like a total doomer. But yeah, it's everywhere, and I don't know if it's getting worse or if we've plateaued.
I
But
wanted to
yeah,
ask,
it's everywhere.
let's go back to 2002. You're writing about gender then. I mean, it's all over the place now. What were the themes or concerns or issues then?
Oh, okay. So this is actually, it's quite personal, but I'll do my best. Have you come across Louise Perry's book, The
Oh
Case
yes,
Against the Sexual Revolution?
I had her on the show. I read the book. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so it was essentially that in 2002, I suppose somewhat from a male perspective, but having been through some pretty deep soul searching about my own masculinity in the late 90s and early 2000s. And I had, Louise Perry, funnily enough, well, not funnily enough, she talks about, the dad and the cad. And I was, I think pretty much all men will on some level understand what I'm talking about. And I went through some pretty deep soul searching about what kind of man I was going to be in the world. And I could tell I had both aspects in me. And the cad path struck me as being, remarkably dark and inhuman ultimately, and just against my basic philosophy of human connection. And I think fortunately I went down the other path. But
Wait. Let me just clarify this because you're
Okay,
speaking very
sorry.
theoretically. You mean you just liked having a lot of sex with a lot of different women?
Um, Not that I did, but the concept of it in sort of pondering that struck me as being. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to work out my own life philosophy when I'm a young man, and I realize what ultimately matters to me is genuine human connection and caring about the well-being of others and that sort of thing. And so that path struck me as being um, inconsistent with that. And plus, when I talked to various womanizers and saw their attitudes to it and saw the effect that such men had on women, like the whole thing was distasteful. But as I say, it was
Yes.
to say the
Yeah.
least. But I mean, this was a very powerful thing for me as a man because you see your friends being womanizers and you're like, part of you wants that, but then the other part was like, no, this is diabolical. Anyway, there's no way to talk about it without being a bit personal. So that drew me into wanting to write about that sort of stuff. So I studied a lot of feminism, and I was, I guess, kind of shocked to discover the branch of liberal feminism, which encourages what would you call it, promiscuity. And so the fundamental question I kept asking myself is, what are the kinds of men all these women are being encouraged to have sex with? And I knew exactly what kind of men they were. I mean, I know them. Some of them are friends. I struggle with them myself. And I was amazed that liberal feminism never, ever, ever talked about that. There was this great void of the kind of masculinity that was being encouraged and how, frankly, antisocial it was. And it was just like, there's a staggering gap here that no one is talking about. So I wrote my honors thesis about it. I could have done a lot better, but, just trying to say, this is the kind of masculinity we're dealing with, and liberal feminism is not talking about it. And I learned that that's not the kind of stuff you're meant to talk about at university, and got a fair bit of pushback. And also my supervisor at the time, um, wanted me to begin my thesis by basically outing and denouncing myself as a male, because we all know that's what you do now with identity politics and intersectionality. But this was 2002. So I'm thinking, why the hell would I write that? Like, it doesn't change my arguments. It doesn't change my reasoning, my evidence. I kept sort of thinking, like, okay, maybe I've made some bad arguments, but please just engage with my arguments. Don't say, this thesis is bad because you don't begin it by foregrounding your masculinity or whatever. And I'm happy to talk about my masculinity, but they wanted a denunciation or something like that. I could feel it. And that sort of began my path of why can't I talk about this stuff? Why can't there's, and then, from that point on, I began to sort of sense all the various taboos that you can't talk about, and the illogic of identity politics and postmodernism. And yeah, I mean, that's sort of the longer version of the story. And interestingly, I actually want to go back and write about this for my next book, even though Louise Perry's kind of done it now. I think I have a bit of a different angle and a male perspective. So if I can find the time, yeah, I plan
Oh,
to
you
return to the
absolutely
topic.
should do that. I was amazed reading her book that it's just now dawning on women, like maybe you
Now,
can't have sex the same way that men have. I mean, this has been my complaint here for years on the show, talking about evolutionary psychology. Why has this stuff on gender sex differences in male female sex differences in mating preferences? This
uh,
is standard evolutionary psych 101 from the 90s. David Buss and all these people have been writing about this, and they have
uh,
massive data sets. I mean, what you've just described, Jamie, you are square in the middle of the bell curve for a man.
this is why I did my honors thesis 20 years ago, because it is this strong sense that on a couple of key issues, women just can't conceive of it. And frankly, from my point of view, they also can't conceive of how dark it is. Um, but yeah, I mean, I won't give too much away, but I want to actually write the book by drawing on literature, because as much as I'm a fan of, evolutionary psych and science, and I mean, I plan to draw on that as well, but there are some pretty powerful and dark truths that are present in, like, even like a work like Hamlet, which I'm just completely besotted with. The depths of understanding of men and women, with like the relationship between Hamlet and Ophelia, or Hamlet and his mother. There's so much revealed in that, and also various bits and pieces of pop culture, movies. So my sense is you can analyze a lot of this stuff and draw in the evolutionary psych. And I mean, as you say, men get it, but yeah, women in many ways don't get it, which is kind of tragic, because you get a sense sometimes of women not necessarily understanding quite what they're getting themselves into sometimes, which is a
When
hard
you
thing to
say
say as well.
when you say dark, why is it dark?
I think it's dark. Okay, I think it's dark. Well, as I say, from the point of view of my own philosophy of human connection. I mean, you yourself said taking the dad path, not the cad path, is better. So I feel like, yeah, to use a woman for sex, you have to, on a certain level, shut down your regard for her well-being. But also, I mean, these are just various thoughts. I mean, these are just intuitions, really, that are hardish to establish. But hang on, I'm just losing my train of thought. Uh,
Well, while you're gathering
that
that,
was I was about to make a good point. Anyway, yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Well, I've had a number of guests on here, including Louise, but I also had Ayala on. You probably know about Ayala. She Aella. That's her pseudonym. She does have sex like a man, and she
Uh,
openly says, "I like having lots of partners and orgies and all this kind of stuff, but I'm unusual." So she gets a lot of pushback from people like Louise Perry, and so her response is, "Well, then don't have sex like I have sex. You don't have to. I want
yeah,
to."
yeah.
Okay,
I hear
so
you.
overlapping bell
Sorry.
curves,
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, the point I was going to make though is, okay. So I say, as a man, you go out to, I don't know, either have a one night stand or a short relationship. But what then happens if, just by your disposition, you're kind to the woman, you're a bit pleasant, you still don't really care about her. she then falls in love with you, but you're just using her, but her response isn't exactly the same. To me, that's actually that's not all of the darkness, but that's an aspect of it. And then when I've spoken to, say, womanizing friends, associates, um, yeah, time and again, the idea is, yeah, I'm with a woman. It's not necessarily a one night stand, but it's a short relationship. And the idea, which is consistent with what you're saying, is, yeah, I could dump her at any time. It means nothing to me. I don't care. But within which time this woman has become attached, fallen in
Yeah,
love,
that is
and
dark. Yeah.
and so and so it is dark. And so the point is that, okay, maybe there are women out there who are happy to have sex like a man. Okay, maybe I'm somewhat skeptical that it doesn't have some cost, but whatever, overlapping bell curves could be. But as a man, if you go down that path, you're going to still leave a fair amount of damage. Maybe not with every woman, um, and yeah, to me that's dark. So some of my friends darkly joke about all the lives they've ruined, or that sort of thing. Like, I'm just thinking of various anecdotes as I've talked to men about this over the years, and yeah. Anyway,
Well, these
something like that.
differences are starkly evident in the difference between gays and lesbians.
Yeah.
The one reason the AIDS epidemic spread through the gay community, but it was the gay community, not the lesbian community, because they're the ones having all the sex with just massive numbers of partners. And with heterosexual relationships, you have somebody pressing for it and somebody saying no. With gay guys, no one's saying no. Right. So that's a huge difference right there. So now that is who you're attracted to and why you like having sex and so on, who you want to have sex with. What about the issues today on gender of who you identify as? What do you make of that as I don't know, an ontologically different issue entirely?
Who do you identify as? That big question. What can I say about that? I'm on board with, I think, standard sort of IDW positions. You are with a few anomalies. You're a biological male or you're a biological female. That's okay. Here's a thought that comes to mind. I don't really know what gender means. Sometime in the 80s, we switched the word sex with gender when all of this stuff was getting going. So on your passport, you didn't write sex, you wrote gender. But for a lot of the time, gender just meant sex. It was the new word. So that's confusing already. So we're already dealing with a lot of confusion. Biological sex is really a very clear category. So then what's gender? The feeling of being a man, the feeling of being a woman, which there's, I suppose there's something to that. And I suppose you could then identify as being a woman, identify as being a man. Does that mean you're going to be having all the same experiences? Look, I don't know. I'm reasonably liberal. But the trouble, as so many people point out, the trouble for me comes when obviously there's men in women's spaces that's been worked to death. Surgery. I still don't understand how you can change sex by surgery. You can't. You can change the cosmetics of it. Sure, you can look a bit more like a man or a woman, but to me, it's just, I'll tell you other things that blow my mind. So for 20 years, I've been aggressively attacked by innumerable academics for thinking that gender wasn't a social construction for reasons we've discussed. I don't think the human mind's a blank slate when it comes to, you know, a man or a woman, but you get aggressively attacked for saying that. And now it turns out, as some people talk about, now it turns out gender's an essence in the trans world. And it turns out a man can actually have a gendered female essence. I'll tell you what's really interesting about this is that surely it then follows from that there is a woman essence that probably most women have. And so we're back around against the whole idea that gender's a social construction. So the feminists who have argued for the blank slate view for such a long time, if you're on board with the trans thing, then, you then have to walk back the other stuff from the last 20 years. And of course, none of this makes any sense. The paradoxes, clash together. And that's why the whole thing's ringed by taboos, because you can't talk about it because it makes no sense. So back to your question, what does it mean to identify? I don't. I sort of barely know. Dress however you want, I suppose. But But as I say, yeah, men in women's spaces, big question marks. I do sort of ponder. It's like, okay, so if you're a woman and you're now identify as a man, I ponder, so are you going to go through the same psychological discussion that we've just talked about? It's like, okay, am I going to be a dad or a cad? I mean, really, are you going to be going through that experience as a woman who's now a man? Are you going to be, married for 20 years and have a family and then get divorced and have to rediscover your masculinity in your 40s? I mean, are you going to go through those experiences? Probably not. Does that then mean you can't identify as a man? I don't know. But I don't know. What are we going to talk about in the pub? I don't know. Like, there's just so
Yeah.
many strange, mysterious things that, I mean, I can talk about them with you, but already in the back of my mind, I'm like, people will watch this and I'll be in even more trouble. These are all things which should be discussed and poked
Of course.
around at and
Of course
explored.
they
And,
should be discussed. I mean,
and
that's the only way to.
obviously, like, I'm now
Yeah, well,
struggling with the paradoxes.
it's been explained to me that, you have this feelings of being kind of discontent with your sex, and you sort of feel like you should be the other sex. So getting the parts or wearing the clothes or whatever reduces the amount of anxiety you have about being in your own body, so to speak. I listen to that. I try to make sense of it. To me, ultimately, it comes down to almost a Cartesian dualism. Like, there's my body, and then there's this other soul floating around up there. Now it's a gendered soul, right? Your essence,
Huh.
the two spirit, you have the spirit floating. To me, it's just another incarnation of our natural born dualism. It just feels like I have a mind that's not just my brain. So I think to some people, it just feels like I have a gender and I have the wrong one, or I'm in the wrong body or something like that.
I mean, that's fair enough. I mean, I don't dismiss gender dysphoria at all. I mean, it's probably very weird being a it's weird being a man, it's weird being a woman. We have these urges, as I was talking before, some of them can be quite dark. Um, I don't think, just to digress into something else, I don't think we're meant to be happy in life. I mean, we're an evolved organism, and suffering and pain and
That's part of it.
problems is it's all a part of it. So surely, reproduction and all that's going to loom as one of the it's one of the most significant things in life. So it's understandable people are going to have troubles around that sort of thing. It's just the big question is, what now? What do we do about it? What do we do about it individually? What do we do about it as a society? It's not clear.
I wanted to ask you about this idea of insights into the human condition through literature. I've been
Oh.
toying with this idea. My next book is on truth. So, we're used to thinking of empirical truths, subjective truths in science. But what do you make of literary truths? Okay, so to ask, were there really four brothers Karamazov in Dostoevsky's novel? It would be like asking, is there really a Harry Potter somewhere? It's like, what are you talking about? That it's a story with deeper truths about the human condition. So, okay, here's my point. I've been trying this out on Christians who insist, because I started this debate about debating creationists and then intelligent design theorists and then theists about the resurrection and so on. So I've been trying this out. Maybe the resurrection didn't literally happen. It's a mythical truth or a psychological truth or a literary truth. The Bible is a book of literature, a great literature that says much about the human condition. Why not treat it like that? And then I channel a little Jordan Peterson, and talk about the dragon and mythological stories and their deep meaning and so on. But I have to say, I've not been very effective at this. At least the Christians I try it out on are like, oh, no, 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 no. There's no point in even being a Christian if the resurrection didn't literally happen.
Huh.
So I don't know what you make of that.
Yeah, I've seen those attempts. So yeah, yeah, it doesn't work. Um, yeah, I hear you.
Maybe transitioning to your book, what do you make of Jordan Peterson? Because when I bring this up, these theists and Christians I talk to, they're as frustrated with Jordan as I am. Like, Jordan, just
Oh,
say it. Do you believe in God or not?
he won't
Do you
say it,
believe?
will he?
And he won't say it. And he won't say it to them either. They're like, come on, Jordan, you're on our team, right? He's like, well,
I kind of like that he doesn't say it because he does. I mean, he is on quite strongly on that team. And he seemed a little bit maybe more in the middle in the early days, but he's quite strong. He seems more strongly on, yeah, the sort of the right conservative team now. Yeah, it's interesting that he won't say it. Um, But I don't know. You want to
but
say a bit more? Oh, sorry. You go.
well, I was just gonna say, but he's correct in treating that in the same way that you would of great Shakespearean literature says deep truths about humanity. The stories are made up, but so what?
Mm. But yeah, but
That's a
this is truly like this is one of the when you think about things in life, and sometimes you come up with an answer in a week, and sometimes you come up with an answer in a month, and sometimes it's a year. Sometimes you never come up with an answer. I've been pondering the relationship between truth and literature for decades, but I feel like I'm starting to come up with answers now after
hmm,
really, really pondering it. I'm like, why does this call to me? And you read it out in that little bio because I squeezed that in at the back of the book because that's like the distillation of 20 years of pondering. But it is. It's the works of beauty, let's call it literature, but even like recent classic movies that have stood the test of time contain the true and the beautiful. And like my argument goes something like this. um, so where the world is full of people wagging their fingers and telling everyone what to think. Like we're kind of doing it now. And that's, that's fine. That's what we do. But it's actually on a sort of okay, sure, we've got science and reasoning and evidence, but it's still kind of hard to know whether one person's finger wag is just their own bias or whether it's something deeper. So we seem to have this process, humanity, where we write poetry and literature and plays. And this is, the whole concept of show, don't tell. You would have,
hmm,
I mean, everyone always talks about that. The
hmm.
best works, they don't wag their finger too much. They show, they don't tell. So you embed the truths in the conversations between the characters and the personalities and all of that. And then you put your work out there. And if the work stands the test of time, which effectively means people look at it and go, wow, that's amazing. You should read that, and it just keeps going and going. And then, like I started reading the classics. I was skeptical. I heard how bad they were from the postmodernists. I mean, I already had read some, but I heard how horrific they were. And I thought, I better just check this out for myself just to make sure they really are bad. And I'm like reading Stendhal's The Red and the Black. I'm going, oh my God, this is the greatest stuff ever. This is exactly the same as the university. The priesthood in France in 1800 is exactly the same as the university. And like this stuff sort of struck me so deeply. And it's like, well, this is why The Red and the Black is when people come back to it, because you read it and you're like, wow, the power hierarchies within the institution, even though that's just a specific case, there is something platonic about it. And this is really important. Even though literature like Hamlet, Ophelia, they're just two people, there's still something archetypical or platonic, something, a form in it that we then say, wow, that's exactly what I experience in my life and exactly what I see in the world around me. And so by embedding it, showing, not telling, it then stands the test of time. It's transmitted through time. It's funnily enough, it's almost a kind of science. It's like every time someone writes something, it's kind of a hypothesis. And the test is how long does it last and does it keep calling people back? And so, yeah, this is what I've been pondering and why I'm keep being drawn back to literature. And yeah, the truths within it often do overlap with science, but sometimes they're kind of deeper and it's not always easy to do a scientific study about some of this stuff. But when you read Hamlet talking to his mother or Hamlet arguing with Ophelia, and you decode the showing and put it back into telling, which is what the literary critic or the philosopher does. They're like, okay, what does this really mean? Well, it means this. And so they bring it back into the world of telling. And there are deep and powerful and enduring truths there about the human condition. That's my sense. So, I mean, even though I'm a literature guy, I sort of feel like I've kind of got my own scientific take on it.
Oh,
I don't know. What
absolutely.
do you
Yeah.
think of all that?
Yeah, I think I pretty much agree with you. I guess the question that the postmodernists would bring up is you're suggesting that the author had some deep truth that they're trying to convey, but
Yeah,
on the other hand, individual readers are going to get their own truths from the story that apply to their particular lives, regardless of what the author originally intended.
that old line. Yeah, I got schooled in all that in the late 90s.
Yeah,
Um,
me too.
yeah, I was told again and again that that's the only way to read. It's all about, what was it, Roland Barthes, the death of the author,
Mm,
blah, blah, blah. And
right,
I just kept
right.
thinking, guys, guys,
Yeah.
folks, the reason look, they got me. The reason I got into all this literature stuff was because I actually think that there are far deeper points. This is a bell curve thing again. It's like you're never going to perfectly analyze a book, and there's going to be different interpretations, and there's going to be outliers, but there's a reason Hamlet has stood the test of time. And there are a number of very, very deep points that you can extract from it, which most people will ultimately go, yeah, you're right. Yeah, that is what it's about. Yeah, that is what it's saying. So there's a huge bulge in the middle of the bell curve of Hamlet analysis, which is these deep truths. And so, yeah, there is some variability. There are some outliers. Every now and then someone will come up with an interpretation that blows everyone away that no one's even thought of before. And you're like, wow, you just found something even deeper. So it's not exactly a science, but there is still something scientific to it. So
Yeah.
variability, yes, but the variability is overplayed, basically. It's not like, I can't write, it's a nice sunny day, I went to the beach on a napkin, and then it will be then read in 500 years' time. There is something fundamentally different between that and Hamlet,
Yeah.
which is highly significant.
Yeah, I've been thinking about films too. Why do I like some films better than others? Like The Godfather, Part 1 and 2, anyway, or even Fargo, which is sort of a ridiculous film, but it's so good because I don't know.
So
These
good.
films touch on dishonesty and jealousy and hate and anger and aggression, and violence, and I don't know. There's just deep themes in there.
Huh.
Yeah, that I don't know. What are some of your favorite films that capture those ideas?
It's funny you should say Fargo. I was talking about it just yesterday. So yeah, I mean, I was an immense Fargo and Big Lebowski fan for
The Big
for
Lebowski,
forever.
another one, right?
Forever. One of the highlights of my life was winning a Big Lebowski costume contest at a movie showing of it back in
You
about
did?
2008.
Oh my God.
Once everyone realized around 2008 that like our generation, it was like the movie of our generation. And it was like everyone dressed up in a costume contest. And I'm like, I want to win this contest. And so I don't know how well you know the Big Lebowski, but the
Yeah.
Big Lebowski's got a landlord, Marty, who does this dance, and he's got this skin-colored lycra outfit on with ivy. And I knew no one would dress up as him, so I dressed up as that and then did the dance on stage. And yeah, I won the costume prize. So that was probably the highlight of my life. Well, okay, good movies, good movies.
Well,
What do I?
timeless movies. I don't know, something like that.
Timeless movies. Taxi Driver.
Mm,
The Alien movie, the
mm.
first Alien movie, the second one to an extent. Um, uh, uh, yeah, it's funny. You get on the spot, and I'm just trying to remember all the movies
Yeah,
I've been
I know,
making my
I
kids
know,
watch
I
recently.
know.
What are the deeper, more? Okay, I'll tell you a great one from recent times. The great movie from recent times, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood,
Oh my God, I've seen that film
Tarantino.
it's unbelievable. It's a great
It's
film.
so good, it hurts. And the whole movie is ultimately an allegory about woke, and it's actually a rapprochement between white men and woke people. And then there's like
It
good woke
is?
and bad
I
woke. It
didn't get
is.
that. Oh, no, how
It
did I
is.
miss that?
The Madsen people are bad woke. Okay?
Yes.
They're really, really
Okay,
bad.
I see,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
see.
The good woke, or let's not say good woke, let's even say like good feminist or something, is the little girl, whatever her name is, Trudy.
Mm,
And the fact is that Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt, they're obviously the old white men,
mm,
and they are somewhat despicable and they are flawed. But one of the key aspects of the movie is Leonardo DiCaprio's character and Trudy, the little girl. Like she's disgusted by his sort of chauvinism and his spitting and his roughness. But they managed to have a rapprochement, which is this beautiful message from Tarantino. It's like, no, the old white man and the more refined feminist women, like there can be a rapprochement, and in the end, the white men do save the day, but they are flawed. Which is I'll tell you another really great point of that movie. One of the things we battle against this whole postmodern thing is merit. So even this week, Shakespeare's now being decolonized. You probably have read about that. They're
mhm.
going back to
I didn't.
Stratford upon Avon, and they're decolonizing Shakespeare by bringing
Oh
in
my
Bollywood
God.
movies. It's just
Ugh,
just crap. But one of the fundamental things we're fighting against is the war on merit.
yeah.
As we all know, it's like Shakespeare has no merit. He's an evil white man, the whole DEI thing. It's, about identity, not merit. This is, one of the fundamental problems we're fighting against. In Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Leonardo DiCaprio does that scene where the little girl Trudy's on his lap, and he's sort of lost it before that, but in that moment, he becomes this amazing villain. His acting is amazing, and he shoves her onto the ground and all of that. And it's so powerful. They're talking about it afterwards, and she says, "That was amazing." And Tarantino's point is that she is able to recognize merit. And so it's like, yeah, she has some gripes with the old white men. They are reasonable gripes. Yet she's not so far gone in the Manson woke world that she can't recognize merit. One of the early scenes when we see the Manson clan in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the camera pans in and they're all just sitting on the sofa watching TV and the dishes aren't washed. They do nothing. They don't act, which is the fundamental problem. They complain. They have a chip on their shoulder. Whereas Trudy, she works hard, she studies her lines, she can recognize merit. She just wants the old white men not to be, such assholes. And so there's something
Right.
to that. And so it's a beautiful allegory for this moment that we live in. So there you go. That's a movie
That's
that
great.
excites me
That is
lately.
so good. Yes. No wonder I like that film. I didn't know why I liked it. Now I do.
Now you do.
Yeah. I'm a big merit guy. So, yeah.
I
Well,
mean, how could you not be? How can you not be like once we lose? Okay, let me say something else.
yeah.
Sorry, on a roll. The whole merit thing is not left and right. The left wing on a good day wants to lift people up so that they can pursue whatever they want to pursue. It's not anti-merit. The right wing on a good day is very much pro-merit because it's about striving and the individual spirit and all of that. It's just whatever we've got now in the woke world is some horrific corruption of all of that. It's like if we could get back to just the good old left and right, where the left are just trying to lift people up and the right are trying to, get on with business, we have a decent dialectic there. But whatever we've got now with this undermining of merit is just truly anti-human.
Would you apply that to this current hatred of Elon Musk all of a sudden by the left who used to love him?
Used to love him. But it's just so sad, isn't it? You just start making the wrong noises, you join the other side, and suddenly you go from being, yeah. I think so. But this is why Elon Musk is such an important figure in the intellectual dark web as well. I mean, not only does he appear on Rogan, he's a man of action. He was a moderate for a while there. Yeah, I think that's got something to do with it. I don't know, but you join Trump's team. Now everyone's got Elon derangement syndrome, it's not just
Exactly.
Trump derangement syndrome. So
Well, that label identity politics, is it really the identity or is it the politics? Because there's a lot of African Americans who are conservative, but
uh,
they're as hated on the left as anybody. So it's not your identity, it's your politics, I think more.
yeah, it's just so kind of tragic where, I mean, this is one of the things that dawned on me it's an obvious point, but I wrote my PhD thesis about this back between about 2005 and 2009 when I was trying to make sense of the corrupt university all around me. And back then I was arguing this is all just a religious faith. Like it might be secular, but it's religious. And again, yet another reason why I got interested in the IDW. It's like the woke stuff's like clearly a religion. And so, yeah, it's an obvious point, but we need to just keep saying it. It's people join sides. And even if you're not religious, it has the quality of religion. And so once someone's on the other side, they're a heretic. It's an obvious and familiar point. So, but
So
yeah,
you think the
sorry.
rise of the IDW at the time that it came about, 2018, let's say things started rolling around 2015 with, say, Jordan's YouTube videos getting popular, and then he goes on Rogan, and then Bill C16, and all of a sudden, he's a giant intellectual, public intellectual, and then things start rolling from there. Is it just, let's think about the kind of cultural timing, technology, YouTube videos, and so on, and other cultural shifts maybe that I can't even think of. Analogously, back in 2006, when Richard Dawkins' book, The God Delusion, came out, and just before that was Sam Harris's book, The End of Faith, and then Hitch wrote God is Not Great, and Dan Dennett's Breaking the Spell. It was just sort of a timing. No one was trying to do anything. They were just doing their thing. And then all of a sudden, I think it was Wired magazine had a cover story, the new atheist. And then all of a sudden that became a thing just because of
Uh,
this one story. I mean, I'm kind of watching all this, and I've never liked to define myself as an atheist because it just means I don't believe in God. So what? It doesn't mean anything else, anything else about me. I'm a humanist, or I'm a, whatever, secular humanist or enlightenment humanist, something like that. So I was sort of glad not to be lumped as the new atheist. But still, it was more of a cultural phenomenon, and then it just sort of died after a few years. There were some divisions about, were you militant enough? You have to be really militant, like Hitch. And then there's those videos with the Hitch slaps, where he comes back with some rejoinders that are hilarious, and so on. And then there was a group called the Atheist Plus, the plus being social
uh,
justice. And then a lot of us are like, well, no, I'm not part of that. Well, am I still part of the new atheists? And then the whole thing just sort of disappeared. So is the IDW something like that, but 10 years later?
yeah, yeah. The times call for something. There's a certain kind of zeitgeist, a certain pregnancy. Yeah, the woke stuff or political correctness or whatever you want to call it, been around for decades, possibly forever in one form or another. New media appears, and that this vast sort of somewhat silent dissatisfaction suddenly finds an outlet and explodes. So yeah, I think it's a similar kind of thing. My sense was in the 90s, in my formative years, I mean, I was quite far off on the left for much of my adult life, and my sense was that it was like a religious Christian right that was silencing speech, and that they were sort of they were sort of the enemy. And so I suppose new atheism, and there was probably some truth to that. They were the censorious ones, and so new atheism was something of the rebellion that the times called for. And then the Christian right now, they're like the kind of people I want to talk to, frankly, because I can have proper open conversations with them. And they've become, I mean, probably not all of them, but I have a lot of very good Christian friends, and I can just have great discussions with them. And so, it was the woke world, which was censorious. And so, the times just kind of called for it. At any moment, as you say, at any moment, all sorts of people are doing all sorts of things. But then I think the thing that strikes the zeitgeist explodes. I mean, I don't think it's just sort of random. I do think it is the spirit of the times coming out, which is like the Trump presidency as well. I mean, Musk, Rogan, various IDW figures, not all of them, of course, but quite a few were ambivalent about Trump or anti-Trump. But then, the woke thing just got so unbelievably epic and Trump, I guess, is astute as well and kind of harnessed it. And the zeitgeist was for this whole IDW thing to suddenly flow into the Trump campaign, which was a very interesting development last year. So I think
Yeah, you
that's
write about that in your intro, which I thought was
uh,
good. It reminded me of that, the Trump campaign slogan about Kamala Harris. She's for they, them. He's for you. It's like,
yeah,
oh, God.
a
And
genius.
my liberal friends are like, this is much ado about nothing. This whole woke business, the trans, the male athletes in the women's sport. Come on, that's a moral panic driven by Fox News. And then I send them examples. They go, yeah, I know there are a couple examples, but you're blowing this all out of proportion. It's a tiny little thing here. It's like, well, but what's the number? At some point, it becomes enough that you hear it every single day,
Uh,
where anywhere, not just on Fox News.
but it's more than the numbers, because I think about this too, and I mention this in the book. I say it's not many people, yet it is the issue of the moment, and the issue ultimately is we are being told we have to believe things we do not believe. And that's
Yes.
why it's the issue of the day. Okay, yes, children transitioning, maybe even adults transitioning is pretty dark, from my point of view. And there are things to be said about that. But I'm being asked to believe things. Like if I go through all my thought experiments and I think about gender being a social construction and I ponder what's meant by all the terms and I see all these paradoxes and I want to talk about them and poke at them. I could be wrong, but that's my inclination. And when I'm told I can't do it, and when I'm denounced, which I am at university for being a transphobe, for even just touching on the idea of it, um, it that's why it's such a big issue. We're being asked to believe what we don't believe. And that really pisses off a huge amount of people, not just on the right, on the left, anyone who just wants to think for themselves. There's a basic human inclination under any kind of oppressive regime to just want to be free to express
Hmm.
your thoughts. I mean, I'll go one step deeper. First principles, surely it's an aspect of human nature to want to understand reality. You want to get back to the true, the good, and the beautiful. Surely it's a key aspect of human nature to understand the nature of reality, what is true, so that we can then figure out how to act, what is good. Humans, our success comes from being social creatures. What's the key aspect of being social? Language, communication, talking about what is true, using language. It's unbelievably powerful. It stops us from having to figure everything out just by, touching the hot stove all the time. And so when we're denied this basic human inclination of trying to understand reality and discuss it with language, people are going to go nuts. And that's why the trans issue is so big for my money. I mean, yeah, people just, it's so frustrated. I think that's it.
Yeah, the rebuttal I get is, all right, there's these, I don't know, 24 maybe trans athletes in the NCAA. How many NCAA athletes are there? Like 500,000? So, their point is, come on, you're making a big thing
Uh,
out of this tiny little. Yeah, but it's exactly what you said. You're telling me I'm supposed to go along with it. Here, so I was just thinking of Timur Kuran's book, Private Truths, Public Lies,
uh, uh,
Preference Falsification, right? So I hold certain things in my mind that I know are true. I got two eyes and two neurons. I can see that boys are not girls and they can't change. And you're telling me that I'm supposed to believe it. And so because of cancel culture and so on, and also I want to get along, I don't like making people upset and so on. So I'll just lie. I'll just publicly lie, even though I don't believe it. So this is the deeper problem, would you say, that you can you can have a small percentage of people who, and so the other principle here is the spiral of silence, pluralistic ignorance, where everybody thinks everybody else believes something when in fact almost nobody believes it.
uh,
And this is how you can get, hovering in the ether, something like a Nazi ideology where, most Germans were okay with Hitler in the early 30s because they got out of the Depression and so on. But by the, say, early 40s, when things were turning bad for Germany with the war, you could not speak out because there was no free press, and you could see your neighbors being hauled off
uh,
to the concentration camp. So everybody keeps quiet and thinks, well, I guess everybody else likes this whole ideology, but I don't. But in fact, most probably didn't. And I think that's true today of most of
uh,
this woke idea. I think most people don't go along with it. Most people, you're speaking out, but most academics I talk to, they don't want to speak out. I know I have some famous scientist friends who are tenured, senior. They have all the awards in the world and so on. They won't speak out, and please, we need your voice because
uh,
the more of us that speak out, the lower ranked people can speak out, or at least
uh.
not have to publicly lie. And they just don't want the trouble, right? They just like
Oh, totally.
I don't want to say anything. I have a friend at UCLA. He doesn't even go to faculty meetings anymore. I don't even want to see these people. I don't want to engage. I just want to stay away.
Oh, but I mean, there is a price. I actually launched the IDW book last night here in Sydney, which was kind of fun. I could do a ranty speech, but I bumped into just a random person, like a young person um, who who I sort of vaguely knew from before, but who's in my faculty, in my school or whatever it's called, department at university, and she said, yeah, yeah. When I was considering honors supervisors, and I was considering going with you, and some person warned me and said, "You go with that guy, you're going to have a target on your back." Um,
Really?
and I,
Wow.
I, yeah, things ain't good for me in the university. I'll tell you that.
Oh,
And it's not even the majority. Like most of the students, like my courses get marked really high as long as they don't go into dangerous territory. Like I do well. I'm obviously passionate and interested, but yeah, amongst colleagues or yeah, a minority of students, yeah, I'm in deep shit. So it's I'm on, as I probably said, I'm on leave at the moment. Like I burnt out early last year from a lot of this stuff, because it's not like they exactly get rid of you. It's, the word hounding is actually the right word. Um, and like a high up colleague of mine said, like the one conservative guy in the whole uni, and I wouldn't even really count myself as being
One.
conservative. I'm just moderate. And I'm talking to him about it, and he says, yeah, they know they can't fire you, so they just bully you and wait for you to leave, And so, like,
Like what are some?
everyone's right to be worried, because it does suck.
Yeah,
If you're a
yeah.
human being who is like, if you're a vaguely reasonable human being who's connected with other people, we're social creatures. Like, you know, when your workplace gets that toxic, and you know that any time you stray into that territory, you could basically, you're just waiting for whatever the attack to come. And it does come. It's it's intense. Why it's so clear why people don't speak out.
Jamie, I think you really are a member of the IDW. That's why you want to write about it. But your story, in fact, is kind of parallel to that, right? I mean, Sam
Yeah,
Harris
yeah,
is, along with Richard Dawkins, these are, and Steve Pinker, these are longtime friends of mine. They are just, 20 years ago, they would have been, as liberal as their liberal bona fides would have been right in the middle of the
yeah,
bell curve. Oh,
yeah.
he's a typical liberal. That's what everybody would have said. And that's true. Now
Uh,
they're gateway drugs to the far right, or they're Nazi adjacent, and so on. And Richard's been hammered recently because he's spoken out about the trans thing. He doesn't care at this point in his life, but he doesn't mind saying there's just two sexes, and he's just been disowned. The American Humanist Association, they gave him every year they give a Humanist of the Year award, so he got one. I think it was 2004 or something like that. Maybe it was even in the 90s. Anyway, because he was always a giant humanist, and then they redacted it or retracted it, and basically kicked him out of the club because he just tweeted. He was late to this story on Twitter. There was this, I'm forgetting the names now, but there was the woman who spoke out about, there was the let's see, the head of the NAACP in Seattle, the Jewish woman who said she was black and she identified as black.
yeah, that I remember that old story.
Yeah, and then there was a story about that saying, well, if it's okay to identify for a white person, if it's not okay for a white person to identify as black, why is it okay for a man to identify as a woman? And it's like that should be a debatable point. It's an interesting question. Uh,
It's a very interesting question, and
and
maybe
then
there's a good answer. I
like
don't know.
6 months later, Richard tweets about it because he just caught up with the story or whatever. Said, "Yeah, let's talk about that." And next thing you know, the American Humanist said, "We're retracting your Humanist of the Year award because of that tweet." It's like,
Uh-huh.
really, this guy? I mean,
I
he's
know
Mister Humanist.
he just. I've been kind of watching it lately. He has just, even with, there was something about Indigenous knowledge in New Zealand, and
Yes,
I think he
yes,
said something about that as well. He's
yes.
like, well, if it's knowledge, then surely we should be teaching it in Hungary or in, Uzbekistan, because if it's knowledge, then it's generalizable. And you're like, oh man, it's like you're a bit late to this party. You're making a good point, but they're coming for you now.
So I wonder, again, back to your book, that if one of the themes in the IDW is exactly what we've been talking about. It's like these were mostly old school liberal. I mean, Bret Weinstein voted for Bernie Sanders, and
Uh,
Sam liberal. Rogan, he was a big Bernie Sanders
uh.
supporter, and then all of a sudden now they're not. Why? Well, that's why.
The left got so hollowed out that, I mean, I say this in the book, I'm pretty sure even Bernie himself, I mean, after the election, he complained how the Democrats had left the workers behind. And in America, I don't know, I mean, if this is true or not, but in America, it's not intuitively clear whether the Democrats or the Republicans are the party of the worker. And if that's
Right,
the case,
right.
then what is the left? Because surely that's at the very core of the left. Poor, struggling people who, because of inequalities in the system, aren't able to live fulfilling lives or something like that. I mean, surely that's at the very core of the left. And if that's not obvious anymore, if you could just as easily stick that in the Trump camp, you know,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
what have you got on the left? I don't know. It's
yeah.
hollowed out. So you know, some people will stay ambivalent. Like, I think Eric Weinstein refused to endorse a candidate, so he tried to stay on the fence. But yeah, others are just like, you know what? Screw it. Trump's making all of these anti-woke sounds. it's not obvious that the left and the right are what they used to be, maybe it's not so bad to jump ship and change sides. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw the Free Press interview with James Damore this week, but I was amazed because I did wonder, where did he go after he got fired from
Where did
Google?
he go?
Well, he's in France now. And he's, works for some obscure internet company. They wouldn't say what it is because he's afraid of getting fired again. But I guess he went through, job application after job application, and he's apparently a brilliant programmer. So he would, do the little test for programming, whatever that is, and ace it, and be like the best they've ever done. Okay, we're going to wait a minute. What is this thing about Google? What happened to you at Google? Oh, no. Never mind. And, again, everybody's pretty cowardly on those things. About that. So, I mean, that's another thing about cowardly about just he spoke the truth. I mean, after he issued that memo, there was a big culture war thing about it. And Pinker wrote about this, about here's what the data actually show. He's pretty much right. And the one unfortunate thing is in the big five personality dimensions, ocean, openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, introversion, agreeableness, and the fifth one,
Here we
is
go.
neuroticism. They need a different word like emotional regulation, or I don't know what the right word would be, but you're calling women more neurotic than men, because women score higher on that particular dimension than men on average, overlapping bell curve. But to say that word is pretty pejorative anyway. It's a big mess.
I know his paper was so moderate and so reasonable and so hedged and with caveats and all of that. But I mean, all of this falls over with the tiniest scrutiny, which is why there are taboos everywhere, because it all falls over with the tiniest scrutiny. And yet here we are 10, 20, 30 years later, same
Yeah.
taboos.
Well, and then let's talk about religion. So politics and religion of the IDW. Atheism is not necessarily a thing, or secularism. They're kind of all over the board. But maybe it's not traditional religion. Maybe it's just having principles of some kind, morals, values, whatever they come from. Maybe that's the emphasis in the IDW.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you do have religious, Ben Shapiro,
Yeah.
Peterson's, just about
Quasi-religious or
religious.
something.
But
Yeah.
I just think, I think the great insight, sorry, which is, kind of what I wrote my PhD thesis about, 15 odd years ago, is that we are all religious to an extent, whether we like it or not. Like humans are sort of social creatures in a very deep way that we can't even understand. And this insight was really driven home for me when I studied Joseph Conrad. Books like Nostromo, and in particular Lord Jim, which I'm actually about to, which I'm actually about to write an article about. But yeah, that my great insight, which is not great at all. Great, sorry, comes out funny sometimes. But that was my insight when I was younger, was that wait, we're all religious. It's just what do we belong to, and what do we do to reaffirm our faith? What processes do we go through? And I think that's an intuition of the IDW as well. And so when the woke thing broke, it was very clear that this was not just a religion, it was a bad faith. It was something that was cruel and vindictive. And as you were saying, without redemption, without forgiveness, very much us and them. So different, actually. Christianity had been on the nose with intellectuals for a while, but then when you look at it more deeply, not even more deeply, you're like, wow, Jesus, forgiveness, turn the other cheek. And great stuff as well. What is it? The Gospel of John, God, I am the Word. And so you have this linking between God and truth, the power of the Logos. And you're like, that's actually a really, really good idea, linking truth to God. And so you have like a Christian faith, which is, for all its flaws down through history, it's a pretty good technology compared to the woke thing. And so once you realize that we're all kind of stuck with a religion, whether you like it or not, you go a bit easier on religious people. And so I feel like that's quite a deep aspect to not everyone maybe, but I don't know, maybe not Sam Harris, I don't know, but it feels like that's something which sits beneath a fair chunk of the intellectual dark web, like this deeper understanding of the unavoidable place of religion in the human psyche, something like that. It's a harder point to talk to. It's pretty deep, that one.
All right. Final last big theme here of the IDW is the West, Western civilization. Oh my God.
Western civilization.
Yeah, I mean, that's another one of these common themes that, maybe there's certain principles that developed over the centuries in the Western world that are good. I mean, this is kind of a Burkean conservatism in a way, right? Let's not tear why Burke supported the American Revolution, but not the French Revolution, because you can't just tear everything down and start over. Because there's certain institutions like the rule of law and religion and faith, family, these kind of things. They're there for a reason. Let's not throw everything out.
Uh-huh.
And maybe there's something like that with the IDW when it hit the kind of crazy woke saying we don't want to tear everything down. Oh, you're a conservative. Well, is that what that means? That I value certain things that are tried and true over the centuries? If that makes me a conservative, okay, but
But surely, when we have progress, which, I mean, almost without doubt, really, the Enlightenment has brought, objective progress, certainly in human health and whatnot. But I think in like political technology, democracy, as you say, rule of law, free speech, all of that's like a fundamental aspect to the vast successes of our life. And even if you can argue capitalism's got its problems, it certainly does. But my goodness, has it pulled a lot of people out of poverty and generated a lot of wealth. You know, just to digress briefly, there's this great story about China somewhere around 79 or 80. And it's like, well, China's like whatever state-run capitalist society now. How did the shift happen? Well, turns out there were a bunch of peasants who went against the collective farming stuff, and they were like, screw this. We're going to farm our own land and we're going to sell the surplus for profit. And that particular region did remarkably well, and they were pulling ahead. And, the great reformer Deng Xiaoping, what happens when he finds out about it? Does he kill them, which is what probably would have happened 5 years earlier? Or does he invent this new thing called, what is it? Socialism with Chinese characteristic. How good is that? It's my most favorite phrase or, thing in the world.
right.
Socialism with Chinese characteristics, which is capitalism.
Right.
But he recognized the damn thing was working and was bringing a lot of wealth and health and prosperity. So yeah, what am I saying? Like, there are so many aspects of the Western Enlightenment tradition, which are, again, the perfect is the enemy of the good. There are so many problems that we can still fix, but there are so many aspects to the West which are still good. And you can complain all you want about colonization. It's not right to invade other people and take their stuff. Like, it isn't. We don't do it anymore. But it's a matter of weighing, isn't it? And that's what you can't do in the woke world. You can't weigh. You can't go, well, there are good bits and there are bad bits. Let's try to keep the good bits and let's reform the bad bits. It's the most obvious thing in the world, but you can't do it. So the IDW championing of the West is like, for God's sake, okay, sure. Colonization, you know, bad. I mean, I shrug because I feel like you can even go, what are the pros and cons? Even then you can investigate it and weigh things. But let's say, colonization bad, many other things good. It's like, okay, colonization bad, Shakespeare good.
Mm.
You can say that. Whereas what we now say is colonization bad, Shakespeare bad. It's stupid. It makes no sense.
Right.
But that's where we're at this very week. That's kind of where we're at.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the IDW just said, for God's sake, there are many good aspects to the West, which we need to hold on to. And as you said before, we don't need a revolution where we rip everything down. What are we putting in its place? Like, rule of law, democracy, liberal values. Like, you'd put a whole lot of the same stuff just back again.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's
No,
much to be said. There's much to be said.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, but also part of it might be the kind of embracing of the blank slate model of human nature by the woke left. That anybody with any life experience, again, 2 eyes and 2 neurons, can see is not true. So that corrupts then the idea of equality and turns it into equity, where instead of equality of opportunity, of equality of outcomes.
Mm.
Outcomes are never going to be equal. Therefore, and if your only explanation is there's social injustice of some kind that's causing those inequalities, then your job is never done as an activist, and round and round you go.
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's so much to be said. I mean, yeah, the blank slate view of the human mind is probably the original sin of the woke left. I'm trying to think if there's anything worse at the core of it all. But I mean, as is talked about endlessly, it goes back to Marxism, the idea that the human's infinitely malleable. And if you can just, manipulate them the right way, you bring about utopia. So this yearning for utopia kind of almost requires a sort of ridiculous belief like the human mind's a blank slate. But yeah, once you accept the perfect is the enemy of the good, and that the best that we can frankly hope for is not revolution, but incremental improvements that work within the limitations of human nature, which is the hard-won realization of centuries, if not millennia, of Enlightenment thinking. Yeah, but somehow that's conservative now. To recognize that humans want power. So it's like, okay, we can't change that, but what we need to do is align power with noble values, the true, the good, and the beautiful, rather than with dodgy values, which would be, raping, pillaging, theft, getting vast amounts of stuff without doing anything, whether that be, rent seekers, rich people on the right, or staggeringly lazy and incompetent people on the left, you know? But it's all, but yeah, once you recognize that the human mind's not a blank slate and we're stuck with power, and there are things like the true, the good, and the beautiful, and we need to work within these limitations to incrementally improve a society, and there's going to be inequalities and all sorts of problems along the way. Yeah. But yeah, the blank slate view is the great corruption that lies at the heart of it all, for sure.
All right, Jamie, that was a great conversation. What's next for you now that you've done this book?
Oh,
What's noodling
interesting.
around in your head for the next book?
Well,
You're a good writer. You got to do some more.
well, thank you. Yeah, look, I'm really keen to keep writing. As I said, I've got a men and women book up my sleeve, which I've actually started writing. But I
Good,
mean,
good. We need-
I'm not going to overshare my personal stuff. But there's things to sort out. I need to get some kind of stability. I've got issues with the uni, issues with that stuff. So I need to get a bit of stability. And if I can somehow swing that, then I can
I
write
just
this
had
men and
an
women book.
idea. So you mentioned Louise Perry's The Case Against Sexual. You need to write one for men on masculinity.
But it
I
is that is my
Yeah,
book. I mean,
yeah,
it's not going to be just for men. It's still going to be for men and women. But it's the gist of it still is trying to reveal to men. Like it's part of it's like, hey men, be better. But part of it is, hey women, this is what's really going on. So it is. It's that kind of thing. So
nice.
I mean, I've kind of got it mapped out. I'm trying to convince my publisher and other publishers to publish it. There's a chance. So that will happen. And then I do actually hope to go back with another book and write about this whole humans are by nature
Hmm.
religious. And again, it's now a familiar idea, but there's still a lot of depth to be said in that. So that's the gist. And then building the vast immersive art environment. These are all on the cards. So yes.
Nice. No, I encourage you to keep going. You're really good. You're good. You're a good mind. You're a great conversationalist. You're a good writer. Yeah.
Well,
Don't
thank
waste
you.
that.
Thank you so
Don't
much.
don't waste those resources. Come on,
No,
man.
I know,
We
right?
we
I
need
know.
you.
You gotta. No, I know. I spent a decade in the wilderness post PhD, licking my
Mm.
wounds and feeling sorry for myself. And then I'm just like, oh my God, what are you doing, you snowflake? Just write the damn book and, just go.
Yeah.
Mm.
All right, Jamie. Thank you so much.